Hey,
go.
how's it
There you
going?
go.
Yeah, I should know
What's
that by now, eh?
It's all good. How are you, man?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Doing very well. Thanks so much for doing this.
Yeah, my pleasure. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So our podcast is all about your journey in the music industry and how you got to where you are today.
Cool.
So let's start it out. You're from Canada,
hmm
correct? What part of Canada did you grow up in?
I grew up in sort of like central Ontario, so not too far from Toronto, but I grew up in like a pretty small town. Um, that's it's called Peterborough. It's the largest city in I think Canada that's not accessed directly by a major highway. So it's a strange place where it's like kind of big for as far as small towns go, but still very much a small town, kind of remote in the middle of nowhere, but close enough to Toronto. But I grew up in like kind of like the center of Canada, the center of Ontario.
Right on. That's cool. So that's strange that there's this major city, but there's no like major highway in there. Like it's all side streets.
Well, it's just, I mean, you connect by like small highways, right? So it's this interesting place where it's like kind of no man's land, but it's like equal parts rural, equal parts city. Yeah, it's a strange little place. It has a unique kind of enigmatic culture all of its own for sure.
That's cool. How did you get into music?
Well, actually, like Peterborough, where I'm from, it's like Canada's a hockey country, and
Sure.
Peterborough's like very much it's a hockey town. Like it's known across Canada as like a hockey town. So I grew up sort of immersed in that. My dad was a competitive athlete, and everybody around me was playing sports and stuff. And I played sports until I was about I guess 13, 14, and I never really just I never was feeling it. Like I don't think I was very good at it either. And I'd always been drawn to the arts. I'd always been drawn to my creative side. I had a love for like music on the radio, and I guess around that age, like early teens, you start sort of investigating and doing like a bit of research on your own of music and developing your own taste. And I was doing that, and I think as soon as I hit high school, I just kind of just really blossomed into it. I ended up going to a high school that wasn't officially an art school, but it had a really kind of thriving arts program and teachers and educators and who were really supportive of their students with creative leanings. And I met a bunch of like-minded other teenagers who were wanted to play some rock and roll and do like punk stuff. And yeah, really kind of for the first time in my life came out of my shell and just found that I had a real love for it. And I was really drawn not just to playing music, which of course is something that I really love, but at that age, I had no training. I wasn't a kid who grew up playing music in the conservatory or anything like that. So I was really attracted not only to playing music and learning how to play music, but sort of everything that I saw that like a life in music has to offer, like
Mhm.
the community and sort of being surrounded by creative people of all different sort of walks of life. And, as I got older, seeing that it lent itself to opportunities to travel and see the world. And I just sort of was really just drawn to the music lifestyle as much as I was
Mhm.
drawn to music itself. Yeah.
What was the first instrument you learned?
Piano.
Piano. How old were
Yeah.
you when you learned piano?
I guess like 13. Yeah. Like I went to my folks, and like I still remember this conversation, like having to go to my dad and be like, tell him I didn't want to play hockey anymore. And I'm the only boy and I have four sisters. So it was sort of assumed, like
That you're going to be that athlete.
I was going to be an athlete. Yeah. Right. And so I went to my dad, and, not only was he okay with it, he got me a piano and put it in the house.
Wow.
And, yeah, they were super supportive. And my parents are divorced, and my mom as well, like, got me a digital piano for her house. And they were both like just really, really supportive of it. And I'm not sure why I was drawn to the piano specifically, but I didn't really get into playing guitar until not too recently. Like I started playing guitar. So I was always a piano person. Yeah.
Okay. So
Mhm.
when you wrote songs and like the earlier releases you did were all done piano?
Yeah, I mean, like through high school, we're talking way, way back. I wasn't really
Right.
doing any sort of official releases or anything like that, but that was all piano-driven stuff, and into my early 20s. And then, I mean, I guess I did pick up the guitar in my 20s, but I only started taking it serious recently, like really trying to learn how to be a guitar player as opposed to just sort of fumbling my way through the chords. So,
Okay.
but a lot of the work I did in my late teens and early 20s wasn't so much my own projects as it was other people projects. I did
Oh,
a lot
okay.
of I did a lot of like side person kind of stuff, doing I did a lot
Like
of keys and
playing,
accordion.
yeah, playing band in bands, like high school
Yeah,
bands.
No, this is, after that in my 20s. I was lucky that sort of right out of high school, I stayed in the town that I'd grown up in Peterborough, and I
Uh-huh.
just became connected to the local music community there. And I got picked up by some folks who were a bit older than me who, already had some things going. And, I like looking back now, I was definitely like getting a bit of a free ride. I was like standing on the shoulders of giants or people at least who were putting in the time. And so pretty quickly after high school, I was doing some significant touring and going over
Wow.
to Europe and stuff like that. Yeah. And so I was mostly doing keyboards, and accordion just kind of became an instrument that I was doing a lot at that time too.
So you toured with one specific band, or you were in just random bands and you got to go to, I mean, touring Europe and touring the country, that band must have been pretty successful, I would think.
Yeah, at that time, I mean, by some definition of success, they were
Yeah.
doing pretty good, and it was mainly one band. But then, kind of through that project, I was meeting other people and being, going on other tours, and like going back to what I said earlier about being like attracted to sort of the lifestyle that, you know, that a career in music could offer me. Like I remember. I still like, I was thinking about this just the other day, but this like specific moment, and it was the first time in my life where I was like on tour with one band, and that tour ended, and we were in Montreal, and like the other band pulled up and picked me up, and then I went off with them, and I was,
Oh
I
my
was pretty young,
gosh.
but I just remember that moment where I was like, I was maybe getting a little ahead of myself, maybe it was, good for my ego at that age, but I was like,
Right.
this is what I want, this is the life, this is what I want to do with my life. It's just kind of hop from tour to tour to tour, and play music, my own music, other people's music, whatever. Yeah.
And then when did you start writing your own songs and actually kind of pursuing a solo career?
Well, all through that, I was writing my own music.
Hmm.
Right out of high school, I had been doing my own stuff, but I guess like, getting involved in these other projects that were more successful, it, took up a lot of my time being on the road, 10 months out of the year.
Hmm.
It just sort of eclipsed the priority of doing my own stuff. So I sort of, I chiseled away at my own songwriting. Looking back, I wish I maybe had have given it a little more, just dedicated a little more time to it at that time. But it was, I guess, around 2010, 2012. I put together a band and we recorded a record in Peterborough. I was still living in Peterborough at the time, and I never really got it put out. But that was when I first started kind of really pushing towards doing my own stuff. Yeah.
Okay. So you'd never put the record out really? Or you recorded it, but it wasn't like professionally put out. Is that what you meant?
Yeah, well, I ended up getting pretty sick around 2012. My life kind of fell apart,
Oh.
and I basically stopped playing music from 2012 to 2018.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, yeah,
So it's like 10 years you didn't play music at all. It just kind of came to a halt.
yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's more like 5, 6 years.
Uh-huh.
I think I tried for a little while, but I wasn't really up for it. So it was only in about 2018 that I started getting back at it, and that I've been, giving it a pretty serious go again. Yeah.
What was it that made you decide to go back into it?
I got healthy again.
So
Like,
you were just really sick and
yeah,
had to
I
keep
had
it
been,
warm and stuff. Wow.
yeah, yeah. So, well, basically, like, my mental health started sort of escaping me, and
Mhm.
my drinking got really out of control, and I ended up getting hooked on like anti-anxiety medication, benzodiazepines as well,
Oh,
and
sure.
and those just kind of took me down, like,
Oh,
real quick.
yeah.
And then one thing led to another, and then it was like street drugs and all that sort of stuff. So,
Mhm.
I had like a a period of rehabilitation.
Mhm.
There was a couple of years in there where I was, trying and not quite getting there, and then eventually things came together, and I was able to get back on my feet and have a stable life again. Like I said, in 2018, 2019, and I tried a few different things, like
Uh-huh.
I studied another trade, and got kind of, far along in that. And I was, I think what it came down to was I just realized at a certain point that I for better or for worse, I sort of closely aligned, like a career as a musician and the addiction issues that I had. I kind of thought that
Uh-huh.
they went together, and then when I realized, that wasn't necessarily the case, that I had a lot of friends who worked in the music industry who had maintained their health,
Uh-huh.
and
Sure.
found quite a bit of success. And I realized I was just, there was something missing. I was missing, the one thing that I love doing more than anything else in the world, that I had some valid fear around and apprehension around going back to, but that it wasn't worth, you know, I had that moment where I was like, in 20 years, I'm not going to be like, you know, not wishing that I didn't play music. I'm gonna be
Right.
regretting not doing it. So I just had that. Yeah, I think I had a buddy in town, and he was a guy I used to play a lot of music with. He was visiting me where I lived at the time, and we went out and saw a show. We went and saw Jeff Tweedy from Wilco.
Oh,
And
cool.
like, I'm not even a huge Wilco fan. I'm not a huge Jeff Tweedy fan necessarily, but like just being at a show, and like we had dinner before and we were talking about music, and it was just like everything kind of clicked. I was like, right. It's like that feeling I was describing earlier, like when I got to high school and everything kind of clicked, and I realized that these were the people I wanted to be around, and this is the way I wanted to spend my time. And then in my early 20s, when I had that moment in between tours where I was like, oh, this is exactly the life I want. This was like a really subtle version of that, of like hanging out with a buddy. It's calm, it's casual, nobody's partying, we're just like having a nice time, we're watching this chill show, who's like this, it's Jeff Tweedy's known for being like, old man music, right? Like,
Right, sure.
Everything's changed, so why not go back to it now and just do it right, and do it in a way that's healthy, and that like where I put my health first, and I prioritize my own well-being, but beyond that, dedicate all my energy to doing this thing that I love more than anything else in the world. And that was, like I said, 2018, and things have just been going since then.
Wow. So yeah. So once 2018 hits and you get back into it, is that when you started writing this new record?
Yeah. So this new record that I put out, like in those 5-6 years when I wasn't playing, like there was times where in that span of time where I probably didn't play a lick of music for months, maybe even a year at a time, like where I really didn't even think about it. I had just like bigger fish to fry at that time. I had to kind of attend to, but all along the way, like, I'm a creative person, I'm an artist. It was, at all times, at least, sort of in my subconscious. And so I'd write poems here and there. I'd kind of sketch out ideas every once in a while. Like at one point I was staying at a shelter that had a piano there. So I started kind of playing around there and coming up with some ideas, just pick up things along the way. So after these 5-6 years, I had a bunch of free floating ideas or things that were sketched out in notebooks. Some were farther along than others. Some were just, kind of like basic ideas. And I started just pulling on those, and I picked 8 different pieces out of what was existing. Some had been songs that I had written kind of right before things fell apart, and they were basically done, just needed a bit of editing. And some of them were just ideas, right? So just kind of pulled those all together and put a band together and started the studio sessions, and kept on working on them it took about 2 years to make the record. Lots changed over the course of making the record. At one point I thought I was going into the studio, and it was like, like I've got like a band of 4 people, we're going to go in and get this done in a week. And then like two years later, I'm still working on it.
Yeah. And then COVID hits, and that didn't help, I'm sure.
Well, you know what? I'm lucky, man, that like I was just thinking about this the other day too, that the last session I did on the record, like the final notes that I played on the record were like March 10th or something like that. Like,
oh my gosh.
Yeah. Like it just kind of worked out that I got into the studio. We were all hearing about COVID, but I think nobody really knew what it was gonna turn into, at least on, this part of the world at that time. So we were all kind of flagrant. So fortunately, the record was tracked by that point. It was all tracked.
That's good. So you've released 2 songs in the record so far. 25 to Life and Summer Fights. Yeah. Tell me about those 2 songs. Why did you choose Summer Fights as the first release from the album?
Well, chronologically, like it was one of the tunes that like I had already had pretty much fully developed before I kind of went dark on the music stuff, and so it'd been in my head for so long. It was sort of an interesting experience as a songwriter to like have this piece of music that I wrote about the specific thing at that time, and then to come back to it, a little more than half a decade later, and the lyrics were the same, but it meant something completely different to me. Like at the time, it was a song that I wrote. I was living out on the east coast of Canada, in the Maritimes of Canada, and I was taking a train all the way across Canada to the west coast. I was taking the longest train route you can take in the country.
How long does that take?
I think if I did it straight, it'd be 5 days, but I was getting on and off, and like, yeah, I was visiting friends all over the place and stuff. And
wow. So if you just sat on it, it would take you 5 days to get across
the
whole thing.
Yeah. But I did it in a month. And yeah, I wrote that song at that time, so that would have been in 2012, and it was about like I was headed out to the West Coast. I was going out there because there was a woman that I was involved with who like I knew it was kind of a bad idea to move to the other side of the country to get involved, but I nonetheless I was doing it, and I wrote this song as sort of a sort of a commitment to a bad idea, just like to owning these bad decisions in life, and
Sure.
in an effort to live a life, and coming back to it all that time later, I really realized it was a song about, sort of, what's referred to as destination addiction, right? Like that idea that, the next place, the next person, the next job, whatever, the next record, the next career, that's when I'm going to be happy. Right. And that really is what sort of, kind of had the wheel of my life for a long time, was this idea that like, if only I go to the other side of the country, I'll have a chance at getting healthy or whatever. And so again, the same lyrics, and I was just really struck by hearing it with fresh ears, that it really resonated with me. And I think it kind of told a little bit about the story that I'm trying to tell with this record. It's very much, the record is it's autobiographic. It's confessional and telling the story of that time. And it felt like a good place to start. Also, like I grew up playing like a lot of folk and country Western music, and of all the songs on the record, it kind of owes the greatest debt to those traditions.
And you have a guest vocalist on there? I mean, when I listen to this, I hear like a female voice in there.
Yeah. So my friend Alana Gurr sings on that as well. Okay. And Alana is actually somebody who I met through the recording process. That's been a really lovely thing about making this record, is that, more than half the people who perform on it are people who I had never even met when I started recording it,
Oh, wow.
Yeah, there's so many amazing people on it who I consider really close friends and collaborators who I love working with, who who I'd never even heard of before making the record. So Alana was somebody that I knew of, but I knew that I wanted some additional vocals on that record or on that song. And the producer, the engineer I was working with at that time, Andy McGoffin, lived in the same town as Alana, and he suggested that she come in and sing, and it was great. It was perfect. Like we hit it off, and she did such a good job singing, and she ended up singing on a few more songs too. And she's a good, personal friend now, and I love her work. And it was a really nice sort of fortuitous thing that happened as a result of the creative process that went into making this record.
That's cool. And that's probably pretty rare to have all the people performing or helping you record the record that you never met prior, or do you just had them there as studio musicians?
Yeah, well, I mean, no, nobody was really like, there was a couple of people who maybe came in as like studio musicians, quote unquote, and then left as buddies,
Oh, sure.
It's really important to me. Like I really like this music thing is really sacred to me, like I lost it and now I have it back. And it's important to me, like that when I'm sharing that, like when I'm communing in music with people, that it's like treated, for me, at least from my end, I'm not like going around and forcing this on people, but for me, it's a deep emotional and spiritual connection to be able to even have the chance to do this again, let alone do it with such like incredibly talented and generous people, thoughtful people to work with. So there were a couple of people, of course, like there was a few old friends on the record for sure, but a lot of it, like I jumped back into music 100%. I started touring right away. I started.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Yeah.
It wasn't even like you decided to get back into it and just started writing the record. Like you were out playing and everything.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I can't really say that I started where I left off because I don't really remember where I left off, but
for sure.
I kind of developed a vision of what I wanted to do and where I wanted to be and what sort of life that I want to live. And then how does being a musician and a performer and a writer, integrate into this vision that I have. And then I just kind of reverse engineered it, and started touring, and I did some pretty significant touring right away, like went to some pretty far away places. So I met tons of people. So a lot of the people on the record are people that I just met along the way,
Oh, okay. Wow. Yeah. And you shot a video for Summer Fights as well. And it looks like and from what I read, you did that during the quarantine.
Yeah, so that was like right around the time that I don't know. Where are you? Where are you located?
I'm in San Diego, California.
Okay, cool. Right on. Yeah.
I love Canada. That's why I've got my Arkell shirt on and my beaches poster.
Nice.
Yeah, so we're in San Diego.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't even actually know too much about the situation down there as it relates to like the public health policy and stuff, but I know.
I mean, it's getting worse. Unfortunately here, San Diego, LA. California's just been. It was going down, and now it's all skyrocketing back. So we shall see.
Sorry to hear that, man. Stay safe, stay healthy.
Thank you.
We So we shot that video right when like the provincial government where I live basically said, that it was safe and responsible for us to get together in small groups. And
Hmm.
so we put together that shoot really quickly. So it was just myself, the filmmaker, Adrian McLaren, who's a filmmaker out of Toronto, and then my buddy Dave Como and his daughter Beatrice were the actors in it. And so we just went to where Dave and B and Dave's partner Jess, where they live, which is a little town called Madoc, Ontario, in Hastings County. It's just a beautiful, beautiful part of the province. And
Yeah, is that a lake or that he kind of walks out onto that dock and there's all that water.
yeah, that's a little lake just up the street from his house. Yeah, and then
Oh wow.
at the end, he's at a big old like abandoned quarry. Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
and we wanted to I'm really interested right now, there's some pretty amazing art being produced all over the world right now, and I'm really
Mhm.
attracted to this stuff that's not so much like about the pandemic or about quarantine, but is very kind of clearly of the pandemic and of the quarantine, that
Mhm.
wouldn't have happened if it weren't for this crisis. And I wanted to try and capture that, so maybe it was about it. But I the idea with it, the song being about kind of trying to run from your problems or whatever, and never really being content with what one has. In the video, I just want to try to capture, a day in the life of somebody who's very, very happy with what they have, but try to give it this sort of like post-apocalyptic feel. So, there's nobody else in the video. It's just Dave and his
Yeah.
daughter. And we
Yeah.
wanted to be like, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say he's even like wandering around like where there's no houses, there's no buildings. He's
Yeah,
just kind
yeah,
of
yeah.
like, yeah, it's all very, yeah, like
Yeah, so
apocalyptic, like you said.
yeah, the idea was like, what if the end of the world was like, kind of chill? Like, what if it was just okay,
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
It would.
it channeling this sort of like, my experience has just been in like, I haven't really left the province that I'm in, but sort of just channeling what the experience has sort of been like for me, and then sort of, putting it into there with, collaborating with those other folks.
Sure. What was the reason that you weren't in the video? You didn't want to be in the video?
Um, no real reason. I don't know. It never really crossed my mind. I guess I've never really thought until right now that maybe people watch that video and think that my buddy Dave is me, for all I know.
I did when I first watched it until I looked at your Instagram. I'm like, yeah, that's not the same guy.
Well, lucky Dave or lucky me, who knows? But yeah, I mean, like Dave is the reason I wanted David, and he's another person that I met, in the last couple of years. I didn't know him before I started playing music again, and he's a buddy that I just we connected on social media. Like we just met on Instagram, and we were chatting about the Grateful Dead, and one thing led to another, and I ended up going to Toronto to play bass, picked up a gig playing bass in his band at a show in Toronto, and we've just been buddies ever since. And because it's interesting, making these friends in music. This has been sort of like what's characterized this for me is like I spent all this time away from music. I booked all these shows. I'm doing all this touring. I'm making all these friends. Things are going really, really well. About to release this record, and then boom, nothing's happening, right? And
Right.
not only am I not going to be able to put out the record in the sort of conventional way I had planned, which was to do a release tour and all that, all these new friendships I have, all these exciting new friendships I have that I'm so keen to immerse myself in, because I was pretty lonely for a long time. It's like
Sure.
all of a sudden I can't do that either. So it's been pretty cool though. Like I was, I'm sure, as far as it all goes, I've got it great.
Mhm.
I'm happy, I'm healthy. I can't imagine if this was happening while I was still using, this would have been a very bad situation for sure.
Right. Yeah.
I'm so grateful that I'm in a better sort of healthy place to go through this, and I acknowledge that I haven't had it any worse than a lot of people out there who've had it really hard, but it was a unique position to be in, right? To go all this time where I was living in isolation. At times, I was homeless. At times I was very, very by myself. I certainly wasn't playing music. I certainly wasn't happy to finally be happy playing music, having friends, having what I think is a pretty great life. And then just okay, now it's not happening anymore. So what are you going to do, right? And that's where I had to get resourceful. And I think so some of the turns that have been taken with this record and its release, and that video, it's just being resourceful, being creative, and leaning into the positive and healthy relationships I have with other artists. So Dave is a guy who I don't know, he just sort of, he puts out a really great vibe, he's like, if we want to have the video is about, what if the end of the world was all right, Dave would be the guy who would be cool, let's roll with it, so yeah, I never actually honestly considered putting myself in that video.
That's cool though. So how have you been promoting the record? I mean, aside from these conversations, like as far as like Instagram Live, are you doing like those live streams to get the songs out?
No,
Get people more familiar, I guess.
no, I haven't done any of that. Like I'm just right now. I'm just being patient. Like I'm up here. Like some people are starting to play shows again. Parts of Canada, there's like bubbles where like provinces, you can stay within like 3 provinces and travel around. And I know people out there are beginning to do some touring again.
Oh wow!
But and then some people, in the region that I live in, are doing shows where they're like playing behind plexiglass and like this kind of
That's
stuff.
funny.
Yeah, it is funny. Yeah, but I mean, I get it. People want to play. Like I get it. But right now, like I don't know. Like I think again, like I was saying, like the experiences I had, kind of living underground really prepared me for this. Like
You're right.
I can make do with very little. So like I'm in terms of like the release of this record, like I'm not doing any Instagram live stuff. I don't think I will. Like I'm really just, obviously like I use social media to like promote the record, but
Sure.
not that kind
Right.
of stuff. So just leaning into this stuff and, trusting that the people that that do that work are doing it and they're doing a great job. And I was joking the other day, like I've been very productive creatively during this time. I've written a ton of songs. I got a few more records ready to go.
Oh wow.
I was, like I said, I was really busy in those 2 years where I was back to playing music. I actually wrote and recorded an entire follow-up record as well.
Oh.
So
Wow.
it's pretty much ready to go. So I was joking with some friends the other day that like by the time I get to tour again, my first major tour might be like a greatest hits tour because I'll have put out so many, records by then.
Right. I've been talking to people that said the same thing because I'm like, did you think about holding the album and not putting it out? And they're like, well, then what? I hold it for a year and now I have another record written, and it's almost I feel like at this stage for people at this whatever album they're releasing, it almost they have to kind of strategically plan, touring it after. Like it's weird.
You know what, man? Like I just trust that everything's gonna work out. Like I have no control over what's going on in the world right now. When this all started happening, I was upset, right? I was pretty shocked, and I was grieving sort of what I was experiencing at the time as this loss. But like, it didn't take me very long to be reminded, like I'm not the most important person in the world, and there's people out there dying. There's people out there losing their family members, and there's people who are still living in homelessness and living in like in a mental health crisis on top of all this going on, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not one of those people, right? So I'm super grateful for that, and like I just trust that with time this will pass, and hopefully like as many lives that can be spared, that happens. And the most important thing in the world right now is not me getting to play shows. And I say that, and I mean that honestly. And I think like, having this pandemic take place at the same time as, like a real important and vital, like, social movement, the Black Lives Matter movement. Like, when I take a look at my life and my career and like how I was able to come back from where I was and be able to do it all over again and get much farther ahead, like that's all the result of privilege, and like, for me, what privilege looks like in this is like when the time comes, I'm going to be able to rebook all those shows, no problem.
Mm-hmm.
Like people are going to respond to my emails. I'll be able to book those shows. So I can trust everything's going to be fine, So in the meantime, I'm just using this time to be creative and try to be happy and treat the people who are around me with, love and respect, and just kind of make sure that we can all get through this together.
I love it. Yeah. Thank you. I mean, yeah, it's been wild, so we'll have to see how this kind of all unfolds. Yeah. But thank you so much for chatting with me today, Michael. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, Adam.
I have one more question for you. I want to know if you have any advice for aspiring artists.
Oh man, I got lots of advice. I think, like, again, speaking from my own, my own perspective and my own experience, I think that like, music is as a musician, music is the most important thing. The art making and the connection to other people is the most important thing. And that like, I think something I was really surprised by and sort of startled by when I came back to playing music is like, there were no streaming services when I was playing music before. There really wasn't any social media when I was playing music before. And now it's like, everything's numbers, everything's quantifiable, right? Like you can really look at your numbers and like use that as a way to like sort of approximate one success or whatever, even though it's, you know, basically not real. And I think that at the end of the day, that like, you just got to keep your eyes on the music, you know, like when I stopped playing music, I discovered that there was this really significant hole in me. Right. And coming back to it and having the privileged opportunity to come back and play music, I'm really reminded that like at the end of the day, music is what it's all about. You know, it's not about how many numbers I got or, you know, who's saying what in what magazine or whatever. It's like, at the end of the day, it's about like the joy of writing and playing music and being connected to other people. And that I've seen in other people that like, if you keep your eyes on that, then like all the success in the world is available to you, really. So.